I am a former GE executive. I actually started out with GE as a technician in their lab. And over time, I worked my way into a series of management positions. I ended up leaving engineering and technology and ended up working as a product manager and ultimately a sales manager. And then when I left GE, I had been promoted to senior executive and I was a global business leader. So I ran part of the global lighting business, technical lighting business. So that was the kind of the first 20 years of my career. Technical person by training, and evolved really into more of a people leader as we get down to the last part of my career. So when I left GE, just a little over 10 years ago, I really kind of reinvented myself and recognized that what was most important to me, were really the people leadership side. And I met Elwin about, I don't know, I guess it's going on 15 years. And for a long time, we had this sort of long distance relationship, and I was still with GE. And we decided at one point that we had too much of a crazy life and we really enjoyed each other's company, and we'd be better off if I left my GE job. And I didn't really know what I was going to do. And a couple of farms started asking Elwin different questions that related more to people leadership and growing and developing successors. And one day he just said, you know, my wife would do a better job answering these questions than me. And as an end result, I now have been working with not always dairy farms. It's been a variety of different farms, but I work a lot with dairy operations and other family businesses. And I work in the area of management succession, employee engagement, people leadership. I'm really all about people. I believe that people are not a disposable resource and that we need to treat them differently. And I think today that's even more true than it was in the past, as we have unemployment at an all-time low. And I don't care what kind of business you have today, finding and retaining the right talent is one of the key problems. So that's me. That's what I do. I work with family-owned farm operations predominantly, and I'm really excited to get the opportunity to work with different people throughout their organization and to really become a member of their team.
Yep.
So now we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about management succession. And if you think about what we said in the beginning, Elwin and I, we always think about ourselves as working for the farm. And so we don't work for, so maybe generation 2 brought us in or generation 1 brought us in. We never think about ourselves as working for a person that brought us to the case. We always think about ourselves as we have the farm's best interest at heart. And so what Elwin talked about was the fact that we see this really like a milking stool with the 3 legs. And we think all of these parts are super important to do. So he's already talked a little bit about personal financial planning and your estate plan, making sure you've taken care of that. Then he talked about the process by which we have a standardized process to go through and look at business succession, which is based on goals. And we've talked about how important that planning is and making sure you've funded those solutions, et cetera. Now I'm going to talk about management succession, which is the last leg of that stool. And so one of the things, if you think about it, there's been some studies done. So 3,500 family businesses were studied. And the question was why, what was the most predominant reason that they fail? Now you might think that it had to do with lack of estate planning or lack of personal planning. But the reality is that 97% of the businesses really fail because of management succession issues. So the number one reason is the breakdown of trust and communication. And the second one is having an inadequately prepared next generation person that's going to take over. And the third is having lack of a clear common purpose and mission. And so number 4 is failed estate or tax planning advice. Now, I don't want to make it sound like you don't need to do that, because the reality is we've all seen the case in our business where that what we consider the easy part doesn't get done and businesses have failed. I mean, he's got stories of farmers on their deathbed that had the documents laid out but never got them signed, and those farms don't exist today because of, you didn't talk about it, but really the sibling tax, where the siblings came in and didn't care about the farm's future. They just cared about, let me have my equal share. And so when you have to try to buy out, if you're the only farm heir and you got 3 siblings on the farm, and then you got to try to buy out 3 siblings' interests, it can really be debilitating. So, as I sort of talked about it in the beginning, I'm really all about people and people leadership and how do we get the most out of people. And I like to start thinking, get your head thinking about the way the farm used to be and how the roles have changed or need to change as the farm has grown. So, in the past, everybody was a doer, and then maybe you became a manager, and then hopefully we're getting some people to evolve into more of this leadership role. But what I see is that in the past, the people on the farm were mostly mom and dad and a hired man and some kids. Everybody had to be a doer. There was a lot more doing than there was leading. There was no clear role and responsibility, no organization chart. The communication was pretty tops down. Dad and mom, they make all the major decisions. They tell the hired man what needs to get done. They assign some chores to the kids, and they follow up to make sure that it all gets done. And the reason that they do this, when someone questions them, it's, hey, we've all heard it. If you have children, you've probably said it. Do it because I said so. Don't ask me why. And all the planning gets done around the kitchen table. Well, that might have worked good on a smaller dairy operation historically in the past, but the way things are today, these farms are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're more and more complicated. And the people that started them when they were small 100-cow dairies, now when they're 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 cow dairies, they've grown up with that operation, and they can no longer run it the same way that they used to. So in today's farms, you might have mom and dad, you might have additional partners, you might have more people managers, lots more employees, and not everybody is a part of the family. If you're going to get things done, you can't do it all yourself. If you think you can, you're going to really struggle because the farm has gotten too big. So you have to become a leader of men, a leader of people, and you have to figure out, instead of doing yourself, how do you inspire others to do on your behalf? And you're going to find that if you have too many people with overlapping roles and responsibilities, you'll get a lot of conflict on the farm, which can really be managed by clearing up roles and responsibilities, identifying an organization chart and how people are going to report and what's expected of them. So communication-wise, you got more people, which means by default, if you're going to be successful, you got to have more communication. You can't just tell people what to do. You've got to work on engaging employees so that you can use their intellectual capital, not just their sweat and labor. You have to think about ways to reward those that are contributing more, and you have to use the power of influence to motivate people, and more formal planning and communication is required to get people on board. So I like to share some leadership, what I call leadership life lessons. And the first one, right, wrong, or effective, I actually learned this when I got divorced. So I was getting divorced, and my ex-husband and I were not getting along very well, hence we were getting divorced. And as we really started thinking about it, I started thinking, what did I really want to have happen in the end? And it didn't really matter who was right and who was wrong. What I really decided was being effective was a lot more important. And so if you're working with somebody and you're just hell-bent on being right, what does that mean? Kelsey, if I'm right, you're
wrong.
And how do you feel about working with me now that I've proven you're so wrong?
Not great.
Not very great. So I always tell people, right and wrong doesn't really matter. Let's focus on what we want to accomplish and be effective. And I ended up having a great divorce, and I'm good friends with my ex-husband to this day. And I didn't have to prove that I was right. We set a common goal and we worked to achieve it. The other thing that I learned early on is, and I think most people are like this, I much preferred to say I helped make something happen rather than it happened to me. I didn't like being in that spot where I was constantly having to react. So just think about that when you're talking about the people that are in your operation. Your goal needs to be making them feel like they're part of making it happen rather than dealing with whatever just happened to them and responding to it.
I would say too with that right now, even for owners, staying in the context of I'm making things happen.
Yep.
Things are not happening to me.
Yep, I'm in control. I'm making things happen. I'm engaged. You know, the thing about farmers, and I honestly have never met a farmer I don't like. I appreciate the values. I really appreciate people that work hard and that, you know, generally are good people with good, strong values. But the thing about farmers is they're doers. And I get that because I am basically a doer. I would never ask somebody to do something I wouldn't be willing to do myself. But at the same time, you have to recognize that there comes a time when you cannot do it all yourself, and you can't have it all done exactly the way you would do it if you were doing it yourself. So you have to move from being the very best doer to being the person that can inspire others to do on your behalf. And that's how you're going to be more productive. And to be more effective in that, I like my next principle, which is focus on them. Don't focus on what you want. Focus on what's in it for them, how you engage them, and understanding where they're coming from so that you can better be more effective in communicating. You'll be a lot more effective than if you're just focusing on what you want. I also fundamentally believe, and I know that there are some people in the world that aren't great, but I fundamentally believe that, especially on most of these farm operations, we have good people. There are a lot of good people. And when good people are doing poorly, I often think it's not because they're bad people, but it's because they're a square peg in a round hole. And I think the job of leaders is to figure out how to put the square pegs in the square holes and the round pegs in the round holes so that people can be most successful. And at the end of doing all that work to get the most out of people, to inspire them, to help them be most successful, if they don't fit, then I'd like to apply FIFO, which is either you fit in to the culture that we've got or you fit out. And in the end, it's better off if you really don't have the right spot for someone, and you've done everything you can to make them be successful, and it's clear that they're not gonna, then it's gonna be in everybody's best interest for you to just
even if
sit
that
out.
is one of the children.
Even if it is one of the children. And we've worked with family-owned businesses where, you know, the children, you know, not all the children ended up making it, you know, because they weren't all cut out for it, or they weren't all passionate about it. They didn't have the work ethic for it, whatever. So a few years ago, my daughter was taking AP US History, and she was behind because she didn't do all of her reading. And so she was struggling. It happened to be when that Hurricane Sandy took place. So I had like a week where our whole town was shut down from Hurricane Sandy, which allowed me to learn a lot about US history that I probably forgot from when I was in high school. And one of the things that that week did for me was it made me such an Abraham Lincoln fan. So Abraham Lincoln is truly a phenomenal leader, all politics aside. You know, he really cared about people. He had a very high emotional IQ. He understood how people were feeling. He had the ability to passionately communicate what he thought was the right thing to happen. He also had this capacity to not pick sides, so to speak. He could listen to lots of varied points of view and take those to meld together and find the best answer. You know, he was Honest Abe for a reason. He was honest. He instilled trust because he did what he said he was going to do. He was open. He was candid. He was also very self-aware. So when he screwed up, he didn't have any problem being humble about it, owning it, saying, hey, he made a mistake. Another thing, and he never held a grudge. One of the people that he ran against or had a big problem with, I don't remember the details of the story, but ultimately he decided that guy would be the best for a job in his government. And he subsequently hired him and put him into that role, and great things happened as an end result. So he was also always willing to share credit when things went well. And he also stepped in with his big, broad shoulders to share the blame. And he was able to relax and enjoy time with his team and have fun. So to me, we could all learn a lot from Abraham Lincoln about what it means to be a great leader. So I have a process when I come work on a farm, and it's a circular process because it's never ending. There really isn't a beginning, there really isn't an end, but it has these sort of 6 elements in it. So the first thing I try to do is I come in and I meet people and I try to understand, are we all on the same page? What's our sustainable common purpose? As an example, one time I worked with a dairy that was struggling to grow their numbers, and they had a lot of pressure, not enough barn space, a lot of pressure on the operation. And what they recognized was they had one of the partners who was constantly adding beef cows to the herd and taking up a lot of resource and time. And we actually created the sustainable common purpose that we're about milk, we're not about beef. And we were able to shut down that activity and focus the energies on, growing the dairy herd, which is what the goal of the farm was. So do we have the right purpose? Do we have a sustainable common purpose? The second part is your culture. What's it like to work on your farm? Are we open? Are we honest? Do we treat people with respect? Is this a good place to work? Are we able to have tough discussions about difficult subjects and still maintain respect with each other and come up with a better answer because we had them? So kind of what's the farm's culture? And we've all probably seen different cultures at different times. But we're going to talk a little bit about how you establish a good, positive culture where you can get a high-performance team. The next segment is who's on the team. What's the organization look like? What roles and responsibilities do we have? What's the organization structure? Who are the key people? What are we doing to make sure that they're engaged? How much about the business do they know? Are you still making all the decisions behind closed doors and just letting little bits out over time? Or are they part of the process of making things happen on your farm? Or are you making everything happen to them and they just have to react to it? The next thing is the operating rhythm. And that's like, how do you work together? How often do you meet? Who's going to be included in these meetings? What's the agenda? What are we going to talk about? What kind of decisions are going to be made? And I think establishing an operating rhythm is a really important part to managing a business and keeping communication good and keeping everybody on the same page. Then I'm a big believer in setting goals. So what's the farm have to accomplish in the next 12 months? What's it going to accomplish in the next 5 years? And then how do we take those big picture farm goals and break them down and give accountability to each of the people on our team so that they can be responsible for delivering those goals? And then you can't just have a goal if you're not going to meet as part of your operating rhythm and track how's your performance to the goal. And then every year we kind of revisit this because the world is always changing and perhaps our purpose has to evolve and change as other factors come into play. And so this is the process that I use that really helps me to help farms work on management succession, develop teams, work on developing employees, and keeping everybody engaged.
So this has to be part of the money plan too. You can't do one without the other, right? We can't get Elwyn's stuff going unless this is happening simultaneously.
Yes, so you can, but what tends to happen, like one time I was doing all of this on a really big farm.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me that it was a non-family member that really was stepping up into the biggest leadership position. Mm-hmm. And it dawned on me because I knew from working with him what their estate plan said. And I said, you know what? If you don't start to work on the legal side of this, you're going to have a problem because, your brother's going to be in control, even though he may not be capable. He's going to end up being in control because that's what the will says,
Right.
So you have to do all this. That's why you have to think about all these. You have to make sure mom and dad or that generation is going to be able to retire, is going to be able to let go and be financially secure. You have to make sure that the business succession plan, how the business is going to transfer, is going where you needed to go, wanted to go, that the farm has the resources and assets it needs to be able to continue.
Right.
And then you have to, right, and then you have to grow, you have to work on the people side. You have to make sure you have the right people, and if you don't have them within, you need to be thinking and talking about it now to say, okay, well, what's our strategy going to be? Are we going to package this thing up to sell it? Are we going to find a neighbor who's got a son that could expand? There's all kinds of solutions, but I can guarantee you won't find a solution, or you'll get a solution somehow, but it'd be much better to be part of making that solution happen rather than letting that solution happen to you.
Right.
So.
Right. It doesn't have to be just straight vertical down transfer anymore.
Right.
There's all sorts
There's
of
all kinds of options, but the important part is to really be able to have that dialogue and not to make assumptions about not to make assumptions about what you think is going to happen. I think my son wants to be on the farm. I think my daughter wants to come back, or I don't think my daughter would ever want to come back. Well, let's talk to her about it. Let's get the real, let's find out how they're really feeling, and let's talk about it and figure out what we're going to do. So what I have, because of time, I'm going to fly through a couple things. I have some examples of, people who established a sustainable common purpose. So this next page is just, at a high level, they wanted to be a thriving dairy, which engages its employees in the profitable production of high quality, low cost milk. And then they had a lot of other key things that were super important to them. So this is sort of defines the mission of this one operation. In terms of team culture, to me, the kind of team I want to work on is one that's focused on results, that's not afraid to hold each other accountable so that we can do a better job of achieving those results, that can get together and make decisions and then act on the decisions that the team made. We don't have a lot of groupthink. We are open to other opinions and ideas, and we can have a good argument about what's the right answer and then come to the right answer because we trust each other and go implement it and get those results that we all desire. So another operation I worked on, I'll kind of go through this quickly. They wanted to really think about their farm culture in 3 ways. So they established what their core values were, what was important to them. And then they said, we also want to think about not just what's important to us, but how we get things done, what's our process, and then what we're going to accomplish. Those are our goals. So the idea being, we're going to want our employees to exemplify our values. We want them to follow the process, and we want them to achieve the goals. It happens to be Sunnyside, and they gave me permission to share this. So these are their values. They had these 6 core values: excellence, respect, integrity, work ethic, candor, and humility. We actually rolled this out to the entire farm, to all the employees, to the managers on the farm. And then we gave examples and educated them on, what does it mean? What does excellence mean? What does respect mean? What's integrity mean? Right. And they took that. Go ahead. Did you want to say?
Well, I was just going to say, so like, where is excellence applied in the context of feeding calves? What does that mean in that context?
Right. So we did that with everyone just so they understood this is what we mean. We did specific examples. And then regarding the process, we shared with them, look, we want to engage you. So we don't want just your physical strength and labor. We want your heads engaged in our game. We want to build on your ideas. We want to have standardized processes. And once we standardize it, we expect you to follow it. We want to then work on taking those standard processes and optimize them so that we get the most out of the investments we have. And then we're going to look at ways to invest and grow and change our processes to improve and get better. So that's the how we do it. And then what these guys did was they took all of this stuff and they put it into a performance review. So then that's why the training was so important. So everybody knew how am I going to be assessed? And we just said, is this an area where you need to work and develop, or are you meeting our expectations? Or is it this a real strength for you? And you're an example for others. And so it wasn't just about the core values, but also about their technical expertise, whether they're following the process and achieving their goals. So it's all elements of it. I got a bunch of tools in here. One is a manager assimilation tool. Part of the problem is I used to go, when I was at GE, I would change jobs every 2 years. I would get a brand new team of people. They always knew more than I did. So in order for me to get up to speed, I got to know them and I found out what they knew and I learned from their knowledge. And so I think whether you're a new manager or not, I think if you start to think about your employees slightly differently and you start to really understand what's important to them and what their concerns are, you can go a long ways in terms of improving your operations performance. So these are some kind of questions that I would use to interview my team members and let them get to know me better. And that way then, you know, they're going to be more open to you when there's a problem because they're going to believe you care about them and you have an interest in their result. This is an example of an organization chart. I think everybody should clarify who does what. This is kind of a complicated operation, but they have a lot of partners and they all see each other as equal. So they just divided roles and responsibilities, and that's what their organization looks like. You might want to consider having a career path for future farm leaders. So, you know, you start maybe you're part-time when you're in high school or when you're in college, and then you get hired, you're full-time, and then your responsibility grows and you become a key employee, and ultimately you might become a manager of people, or you might become a technical expert for the farm, and then you might end up as an owner or a partner in some time in the future. And what you might do is say to people that are going to be on this track, what does it mean? What are our requirements? If I'm going to be an entry-level person here, what does that mean? And if I'm going to become a key employee, what do I have to do? How do I get from that point to this point? Because if you want to have a do more, get more society, people need to know, how can I be more than I am today? And what are you going to do to help me grow and develop? You might want to tie compensation in with this as well. I'm all about people, but I'm also about do more, get more. And so, you know, if you're the part-time employee, you are going to have less benefits than if you're working your way towards being a full-time employee or becoming a key employee on the operation. When you get up to being a highly valued partner or employee in the business, you might end up with a supplemental farm retirement plan or a phantom stock so you can start to create some wealth. And ultimately, if you're on track to become a partner, then you might have an equity ownership plan and there might be some buy-sell funding in there. So when we look at, like, this is just an example of a future partner plan. So if you're out there trying to think, how do I get someone to want to come to work and stay on my operation or come back to my operation? The first part is they have to have a fair market lifestyle income. And that's the part of their wealth that they can control. And that would be a base compensation package and possibly a performance-based bonus. But it's not, we can't continue to play this game of come back here and sometime in the future, if you do a really good job, I'm gonna pay you less than you're entitled to today, but if you do really good, then I might give you part of the farm. That's not working that well. And there's a lot of people, young people today, that are saying, look, I want to be paid my base compensation, like a fair market wage, and then on top of that, have an opportunity to become, to create wealth. So I look at it in two parts, your lifestyle income and then your wealth creation. And when you get into wealth creation, you might, if you don't ever want to have a partner, maybe it's a phantom stock or a supplemental farm retirement plan that you put in place. And then if you're willing to have a partner in your operation, you might consider a profits interest, and then ultimately have buy-sell funding with that. One time I worked on an operation where mom and dad were convinced their son just didn't work well with people, and that was his biggest problem. Well, when I went and interviewed all of the key people on the farm, mom, dad, the son, and other key employees, what really actually came out is that yes, he was willing to work on his people skills, and he acknowledged that that wasn't the area where he's maybe the strongest, but he really also was missing a lot of experience and opportunity in more technical elements of running the farm. And if I challenged him with the idea that he would be running this operation someday, he was like, wow, there's so much I don't know yet because mom and dad have kept it from me. So we use this skill gap assessment to identify where his gaps were so we could put a development plan in place. 360 feedback, maybe everybody's heard of that. That's getting feedback from people that work for you as well as people that you work for, and then people who are your peers. And we do that to help grow and develop employees so that they can become better team members. And this is just an example of a 360 feedback that I've used with farms. So it just basically talks about the things they value in a team member, and then goes through an assessment of how well they're doing on those, so we can figure out areas where they need to grow and develop. And then in addition, we identified 3 things that they do that we like and we really wish that they would continue to do. 3 things we think that they should do more of. So we call this continue, start, stop feedback. So they do some more. And stop is just 1 or 2 things that are really dysfunctional, that if they stop doing, they'd be a much better team member. I believe in recognizing and rewarding employees. I'm a big proponent of work hard, play hard. And I think all farms work really, really hard. So I think we need to take the time to acknowledge people that go above and beyond for us. And there's lots of ways in which we can engage our employees. You know, when you offer someone training and development, you're investing in them. That's huge. You might set up a thing where if somebody goes above and beyond, you just have a little because of you award. Maybe it's $20 and they get to, you know, take themselves out to lunch or take themselves, whatever they want to do with it, but it's because of you. When I worked in GE at one point, employees could give because of you awards to each other. So you could recognize somebody else that helped you. I mean, it wasn't like everybody could just hand them out. You had to write it up. This is why, and it had to get approved. But it made sense, and it really built a really strong team spirit. Say you got your crop guy, and he is staying out in the field just trying to get those crops in, and he's missing his home life, and his family is frustrated. Maybe you do a night on the town award, and you send a note home to his wife thanking her for how hard he's working, the sacrifice she's making, and you put money in that for him to take her out to dinner. So, and then you could have a bonus, and ultimately you could have a supplemental retirement plan. You could have a phantom stock agreement, or you could ultimately get a profits interest. And the other important thing is make sure that the people on the farm know what the goals are and how we're doing against them. And when we have success, celebrate as a team. This is an example of an operating rhythm. You know, there's parts of the farm that are just day to day. We have to meet, certain people have to meet, and we have tactical things we have to get done. Monthly, I think we should review what's our performance versus what we thought we were going to do. What were our goals? How are we doing versus those goals? If we never review them, what's the point? Are we getting any better if we don't take time? So, you know, at GE, I would have my goals, and they were always hanging on my wall, and I was always looking. They drove my behavior. They were the things I was supposed to be focused on. I'm not saying they never changed, because life happens and things change, but they really drove my behavior. You might meet every fall to figure out what we're going to do. You know, what's our business plan for the next 12 months? You might meet in the winter to just focus on the people. So we make sure that everybody gets a performance review, that we are talking about who the talent is in the organization, who do we want to retain, who do we want to grow, who should get some training, who should get a raise. Not everybody is treated equal. And then we have these team celebrations, maybe all hands meetings in June and December to share our performance and our updates and celebrate with everybody. And then maybe in the spring, we start looking at the future. And the key people on your leadership team should be involved in these meetings, and key employees brought in to keep them engaged as appropriate. And this is just an example of some farm goals, and we don't have to go through that. Every farm can create their must-dos. And then we take those big picture farm goals and we say, okay, who on the team is going to be responsible for driving these, so that we can get accountability in the organization. And then I'm a big believer in that people should do a self-assessment of their performance. So you should have a one-pager where that person gets to say, here's what I accomplished last year, here's what I think I'm good at, here's where I think I need to grow and develop, here's where I'd like to be. I'd like to, you know, I don't want to be a milker for the rest of my days. I would like the opportunity to move to another part of the operation. This is my interest. And then the manager then uses that to say, okay, this is what I think you accomplished. I agree with your accomplishments. Maybe you forgot 1 or 2. This is what I think you're good at. This is your area where I think you need to develop. And these are your career goals. I mean, you know, they're in line with where we see you. You don't have to be a milker for forever. Or, no, we think you're a really good milker and we'd like to see you maybe become a parlor supervisor, whatever it is. Yeah. And then what they're going to accomplish next year. And then really important part, don't talk about people's money during the performance reviews. Once I gave this talk and someone said, oh my God, I would have to talk to them twice if I didn't tell them. And I'm like, yes, more than twice. Talk to them frequently. Because if you talk to people about what they're getting paid, then all they do is think about what I'm getting paid and they don't listen to your feedback. So I've already talked about continue, start, stop feedback. If you got somebody who's having a problem, then I recommend putting together a performance improvement plan. So identify what the specific issue is, review it with them, agree on what you need to see them to do differently, and then monitor every week. Set a time frame. So you got 2 months to get this better, and we're going to talk about it every week. And if it doesn't get better, then we all know what the end result is going to be. And what I'm typically see is if you do this, one of two things happens. The person leaves of their own accord, or they actually get better because you actually told them what the problem was. So this is just an example of creating a dashboard. So you could put this out on a bulletin board and publish, you know, what your results are versus your goals. So the red line would be the goal. And, you know, these are just my thoughts. You know, if you really want to find, develop, and retain talent, you know, you might think about starting an internship program. So, you know, lots of dairies are hiring people out of Cobleskill or Cornell. You know, they're taking the risk. They're bringing someone in from, you know, one of those universities. Then I also think, you know, you should be really focused on engaging your team. Don't make decisions in a vacuum. You know, let people feel like they're part of making things happen. Develop a reputation as this is a really great place to work. Attract people to want to come there. Care as much about your people as you do about your cows, because it's your people that are going to care for your cows. And, you know, to grow and develop a person, you can grow a new milk cow in like 2 to 3 years, right? Right. Takes a lot longer to grow and develop a person, and people are just not disposable. So, you know, have good communication, be willing to listen and learn, as not just give direction. Listen to feedback, understand what you could be doing better, be self-aware, get to know your team members and let them get to know you, know what's important to them, and then help them to achieve their goals. They'll do more for you. Involve your key employees in the process of working on the farm. Don't just have them provide labor for you, get their intellectual capital. Clarify roles and responsibilities to avoid conflict, pay people for doing a great job, grow people, invest in them, send them to training, make them more valuable. When they're more valuable, it's good for them and it's good for the business. Set goals and track and share the results, and then have an environment that is fun to be at, recognize and reward, you know. So do an honest assessment of yourself. How am I doing? Am I a good place to work? Would I have a reputation of being a good place to work? Is that even important to me? Or do I just think it's your job, just go do it? It's your job, work harder, just get it done. I don't know why you can't get it done, just get it done. Or do you say, what's the reason why you're struggling to get that done? How can I help you learn how to do that better? This is really our belief, is that, you know, succession really lies in the heart of the leader. So the person that's wanting to have a succession plan has to desire for the farm that he created, he or she or they have to want it to go on more than they want to control it today. Yeah. And so the real measure, and then they have to change how they think about success. So they need to be happy when their successor is doing well.